Yeah, and I used to get that question all the time.
stuff of what we're doing this morning started. Just in case we've got any. Do we have any viewers? Do we have anybody waiting for us? Oh, well then, if you don't mind, I would like to just wait, because if we had participants, I would definitely want, to get things moving, but if it's just us. Hi, Dr. D. Hey, good morning, everyone. It is 9:19, and I'd like to call our study session this morning to order. Study sessions are opportunities for the school board to learn more about specific topics. No decisions are made at study sessions, and an opportunity for public comment is generally not available at this meeting. I'm going to begin with our tribute. In partnerships with tribes who called Phoenix their home first, we acknowledge and respect the land our schools are built on. We commit to being a strong partner with any and all tribal nations who entrust their children to our schools. We are grateful and honored to be partners.
President Trujillo, I just want to clarify, this is not a study session, it's actually a special meeting.
Okay. All right, special meeting it is. We hold these on other dates different than our regularly scheduled board meetings because sometimes we need to take action, and notice of these meetings are posted at least 24 hours prior to. So our goal for today is to focus on our decision to enter contract negotiations. So thank you, Ms. Miriam, for the clarification. And may we please have a roll call this morning?
Carmen Trujillo,
Here.
Jessica Bueno,
Here.
Reggie Carrillo,
Here.
Alicia Vink,
Here.
Elora Diaz.
Here. Sweet. May we please move on to the Pledge of Allegiance this morning? My apologies. With the quorum present, we will proceed with our special meeting this morning. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have a motion to adopt our agenda as presented?
Alicia Vink, so moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Jessica Bueno, second.
Thank you. Ms. Mayor, may we please have a roll call vote?
Carmen Trujillo,
Aye.
Jessica Bueno,
Yes.
Reggie Carrillo,
Yes.
Alicia Vink,
Yes.
Elora Diaz.
Yes.
With that, our motion passes and we can move on to the meat and potatoes of our meeting today. Please let's welcome Mr. Chris Thomas from Gus Rosenfield to present information regarding superintendent contracts. Welcome and thank you for being here and being patient with us.
There we go. Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so pleased to be here. One, because this is a great time for your district. I think the biggest decision that a board has to make is choosing its superintendent. And so you have chosen one, and now we're going to go into the next phase of it and bringing that superintendent under contract and getting her set up for success. So very happy to be part of the process. I'm happy for another reason that of all the school districts in this state, this was the shortest commute from the office. So it's terrific all around. And I'm just in learning more about your district. I've always watched Phoenix L because it was so close by, and obviously growing up here in Phoenix. Just amazed at some of the history I did not know about this, about your district, about how it's the first district in the state, and what an illustrious history it is, and a great future, I think, as well. So, all right, let's get into it. So I want to talk a little bit about what's a typical in a superintendent contract. I know that I think 3 of you were elected the last time around. So this is the first time you're going through this. And it can be daunting. It can be daunting for even people who have been through law school to read a superintendent contract. And there's a lot of different clauses and a lot of legalese, and you're kind of wondering, what is customary. And the good thing about having 230 odd districts in the state is that you can compare. You can take a look at what other people do and see whether or not it's typical and whether it's justifiable from your standpoint. Okay, so let's get into it. And this is going to work for me, or I'll just go do this. I got to use the clicker. Okay, I just need to turn it on.
We're running the presentation.
Yeah,
Like this.
got it.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you. So just as a preamble, as well as, not only is it the most significant thing that a board can do, it's also, the only person that on staff that the board really supervises collectively. So that everything, when you're evaluating the performance of the district and individuals that are in the district, you're evaluating through the superintendent. You may be putting systems in place to evaluate others, but that's the one person that the board collectively evaluates. And so why it's so important to get somebody who you can work with and have a great working relationship with. And while it is true that superintendents are paid well compared to other employees in the district, the fact is that, if you look at, Arizona education generally, we're still 49th or 50th in terms of funding. Teachers are paid less than their national peers. Superintendents are paid less than their national peers. So not to mention that the amount of responsibility that they do take on. What you're looking for is somebody who you can partner with, who can implement your goals and your strategic plans, and provide stability to the district, and will focus on student achievement, focus on educational equity and access for all, and a fair deal for the taxpayer. That's the other thing that we're working on here too. We certainly want to get a great superintendent, but we also want to get a superintendent with fair compensation. And the superintendent, of course, in this process, they're looking for, something, a position that matches their values and talents, a board that wants to work on the same things that they're interested in working on. They want to have clear authority to run the district. and lead the staff. They understand that's a partnership in terms of the governance side, but they definitely want to make sure that they come out of this process with clear authority to do their job. They want an environment that they can grow professionally in. And again, of course, fair compensation for their qualifications and the nature of the work that they do, and some reasonable measure of security. One of the things that is pretty striking, and got here a little early and I was looking at your previous superintendents, and it's amazing. And you look at over the years, the superintendent tenure used to be, you had people there for 20 years, 15 years, and that was the norm in Arizona. And it's not that way anymore. And there's lots of reasons for that. But one of the things that superintendents are looking for, and why they have usually a 3-year contract that's different than other employees, is that they are sort of on the hot seat. Their positions are not as secure as they used to be in other times. So that is one of the other things that I think has kind of moved compensation in the direction it's gone. So with all that, let's get into what compensation terms are. And I want to please stop me anytime, any questions you may have, any comments you may have. This is supposed to be a session where you're learning and you're getting your questions answered. You can obviously discuss amongst the board about how you feel about certain items. And you can even ask me questions about the current contract, but we'll get into that more detail in the executive session. Also get into detail in the executive session about what maybe other superintendents are making around you that you could for comparables. But if you're just wondering about, well, what does this cover and what are the sort of circumstances that particular provisions might come into play, feel free to ask those questions. So the first thing you have to decide is how long the term is going to be. And in Arizona, superintendents are allowed to have a contract for up to 3 years. One stipulation that is in the statute is that you cannot renegotiate a superintendent's contract who's already your superintendent, or issue a new contract to an existing superintendent unless they are in their last 15 months of their contract. So, which is why, initially almost everybody had a 3-year contract, and I still think that's the norm. But there we are seeing some superintendents say, I'm good with a 2-year contract. And I don't know where Dr. Hagi will be on that, but I just did a superintendent contract up in Northern Arizona, and they wanted a 2-year contract because of that 15-month thing. So that every time, after a year, they can enter a new renegotiation and adjust their compensation to keep up with the market and to, really capture where they ought to be. So that's the first thing you're going to deal with, is the term. And the second one is, of course, the base salary. And the base salary is, really the most public part of what the salary is. That's the one that gets in the newspaper, if there were newspapers or if there were people watching them, but it gets on social media and everything. That's what folks are going to focus on. And for good reason. It is the bulk of the compensation. It drives the compensation for the purposes of the state retirement system, ASRS. Because I don't know if any of you are in the system or familiar with the system, but it works with the amount of contributions you get, which are, a percentage of your income. There's a match for your employer. And then ultimately, if you were to draw benefits and reach, eligibility, the amount of compensation you had and the average of it, depending on when you retire, whether it's the 3-year window or the 5-year window, it's going to be based on what your ultimate compensation would be. So that's why superintendents, especially if they're anywhere near retirement, they're certainly going to want more of their compensation in the base, because that's going to help them out when they retire. Any questions about that? Because that's the big one. So what data does the board need in determining the base salary? Because that's the other thing. You really want to compare apples to apples, right? Because, it's really hard to get a handle on what is expected in this area. And so what you'd want to do is, one is a good starting point is, what's the starting salary of your current superintendent? You'll want to know that, and we can talk about that in exec session. It's not secret, by the way, but just probably better conversation to have there. you'll want to know the superintendents of similar districts. And Phoenix L has got, being a feeder district in the Phoenix Union District, high school district, there's a lot of, 12 feeder districts that go into Phoenix Union. And so you've got a lot of good comparables. So you get a sense of people, superintendents that are in Phoenix that have to live in Phoenix and the cost of living in Phoenix. Also of a lot of the feeder elementary school districts are of this very similar size. You're about 40, between 4,000 and 5,000, I think, or yeah. And so like the district that I'm in, Madison, they're about the same size, about 5,000. So you've got a lot of good comparables to sort of take into account to make sure that you're getting a good deal. And then also, the present salary of the superintendent candidate that you've chosen. You want to make sure that this is a step up for them, right? Because they're, why else would you take on more responsibility, perhaps with more of a focal point and scrutiny, if it wasn't a jump up in salary and responsibility. So those are 3 data points that I certainly would want to have if I were in your position making this decision. Also, you might want to, when you're looking at the base salary, build into the base salary, what about raises in future years? So say you're doing a 3-year deal. Are you going to say, here's the salary and this is what the salary is going to be for the full amount of the contract? That's an option that gives you specificity. Or you might say, well, there's going to be no you could say that you're going to tie what the increase to what other administrators make. So if other administrators in a given year, you've approved a 2% or increase or something like that, then that's what the superintendent gets. Or you can have a fixed amount where, it will go up by 5% or it'll go up, or you will even state the number of what it will be in year 2. That's another option that you can do. Performance pay. Performance pay is, this has changed over the years. Used to be that you had to designate 20% between, I think it was like between 10 and 20%. That's now come to up to 20%. So it could be as little as $1. It could be, a full up to 20% of the salary could be designated as performance pay. This is a subject to negotiation, and really, in terms of one, how much is being allocated for performance pay is one thing, and that's up to you. But the other thing is to, and this is a later conversation when you bring your superintendent under contract. What is it going to mean to perform under the performance pay part of the program? And this is a great time to sit down to build the team, saying this is what this is the goals that we have. This is what we hope our superintendent helps us achieve, and we want to build these goals into the performance pay plan, and we want to evaluate based on those the performance goals. Sometimes boards will take some subjectivity out of this. They may look for hard data points. They'll say, we want to improve student achievement in this area by 5%. And then there's data to back that up. Or we want to make sure that all of our principals have been evaluated and that all of them receive, everybody has been properly evaluated and properly categorized according to the statutes. That might be a data point. So you have lots of options there. But that's another conversation, what that looks like. So I would have that conversation after you bring your superintendent on. And then that way you get the chance to sort of really have from the beginning, let the superintendent know what you care about, how you want to evaluate her. Set around the goals of the district, and you've got some great goals. I don't know when the last time you revisited them, but I looked them online and they're just perfect. So building, obviously equity is a critical issue for everyone, but your district has made it a priority and has specific ideas about what to accomplish in that area. You might want to build that as part of the performance pay contract. and hold your superintendent to account to earn that pay. State retirement system. Now, this is not usually in, you won't see this in the contract, but it's something to keep in mind because it does come up from time to time, especially it's mostly with superintendents that come from out of state. They'll ask that, okay, I don't want to pay my portion of the contribution to the state retirement system. I want the district to pay for that. And by rule, that cannot happen. There's an employer match, there's an employee contribution, and the employer cannot cover the contribution of the employee under ASRS. So I only mention that just because there are superintendents that will ask for that, and by law, you can't provide that. Health insurance disability. If all of your staff are on ASRS, long-term disability is covered under ASRS, health insurance as well. All your staff is typically covered under your policy, and then you may have coverage available for spouses or dependents that they can be bought at a group rate. Superintendents will also ask for long-term disability coverage, perhaps above what ASRS provides. They also may ask for, in the health insurance area, that their spouses or dependents be covered as part of their compensation. Now, that may come for tax benefit requirements from them, but it is something that boards do consider that is a benefit above and beyond what other employees may get. Life insurance, again, it's also provided by ASRS, but they may want to go, superintendent may, in their contract, may want to be provided additional life insurance at the district expense. And that, by and large, is not a high ticket item, but it's important to many superintendents. And I have, again, comparables of other districts of what they've done in that area. Car allowance, mileage or district vehicles, superintendents do drive around a lot. And while you may be a compact district, you have a lot of schools, and not to mention that your superintendent may be traveling outside of the district for meetings and things like that. And there are a couple of ways of accomplishing that. One is you could ask for, the superintendent to submit mileage, and they get reimbursed at the state approved rate. You could provide a district car that for their use for that travel, or you could have that, and this is more typical, is that the superintendent receive essentially a stipend for a car allowance on a monthly basis that they can apply to their own vehicle. You would then require them to have certain kinds of insurance, at a certain amount, and in lieu of that, so if they are provided the car allowance, then they're not allowed to claim mileage, obviously, because that's part of it.
Mr. Thomas, for
Yes.
clarification, if they were to get the stipend for their own vehicle, they would need to provide their own insurance, or the school district provides the insurance?
No, they would typically they would need to provide their own insurance, but you can stipulate as a exchange for this stipend, they will be required to get insurance of these certain amounts.
Thank you.
Yes. Professional travel or continuing education, you want your superintendents to maintain their certificate. They have continuing education requirements. You also want them to grow and learn, the latest in education and curriculum and things like that. So it's typical that, professional organizations are covered. It can be covered in a couple of ways. You can specify what those organizations are and say that we will just pay whatever the fee is. Membership fees are on things like ASA, which is the Arizona School Administrators, the AASA, which is the national organization of the school administrators. And also, Arizona Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents, that's another group that you may want your superintendent to be part of. You can either specify that, or you can provide, again, a dollar amount. I've seen districts say, we provide $5,000 stipend for membership in professional associations of the superintendent's choosing. And you can provide it that way. Other districts also want their superintendents to be active in civic organizations to support the district, so that they are making contacts with business leaders and things like that could ultimately support the district. things like Rotary or Kiwanis or Chambers of Commerce. This was probably more important, 20 or 30 years ago, but it does still happen. And many superintendents find those connections really important to have. And in specifying for, travel or continuing education, you can specify that it's for professional development. You can put it in the contract how much travel can be done and provide for a cap on that. Or you can just say any reasonable, expenses subject to board approval. And specifically you want to make sure that for out-of-state approval, that those trips are approved, because those can get expensive. Annuities. So we already talked about state retirement system, but in addition, this is the sort of private sector and public, or sort of the nonprofit and public sector equivalent of a 401k. So in additional retirement, superintendents are often provided an annuity of a certain amount to be don't put in. Typically, a 403b is what is used. I looked at your previous superintendent's contract, and I believe that's in there. And it's again set aside for retirement. What's interesting is the law says that it's authorized that districts are allowed to do this, but it has to be targeted for employees that have been set for that are of high needs, where to recruit them or to retain them, you need to provide this benefit. I think you can easily make the argument that superintendents are in those classes, but that is the authority that you have in statute. Vacation, sick leave, personal days. Some districts make this real simple, and again, just say that it's going to be the same as any other administrative employee and accrued at the same way as any other administrative employee. But then other superintendents will say, well, because I'm starting fresh with the district, I would like a certain amount of vacation days provided in the contract, or sick leave / personal days provided in the contract. And I would like it to be, more front loaded, so I'm not starting from scratch. Again, that's up to you to decide if you want that in the contract, or if you just want to submit it, make it the same as any other administrative employee. And then just some cleanup issues, and this is usually specified in the contract, requiring that the superintendent maintain their my throat. Requires certification, maintain their administrative certification, maintain a driver's license, because again, they're driving around, and a fingerprint clearance card as well. You want to make sure that they have that and they maintain that. And then I say put this in anything else the board wants, because the board may want certain kinds of involvement activities that they want covered under the contract. Your contract, your existing contract, has a lot to say about the incapacitation of a superintendent and what happens then. It's unusual than other excuse me, than other contracts that I've seen, but there may be a good reason to have it. And it's certainly legal to put that in if that's important to you. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have if I haven't covered the things that you have on your mind. No? Okay, you guys are making it easy on me.
We're thinkers. So
Yeah, that's all right.
Just take a few minutes to
Sure.
wrap my head around a few things.
Do you have any other examples of like the anything else the board wants? Like, I don't even think I remembered that we had something about incapacitation, but that actually makes sense to me. I'm a planner, so I would have included something like that.
Yeah, here's just a few. I got a spreadsheet from some districts that I've got. Some have a stipend for an earned doctorate.
Okay.
So although many superintendents have a doctorate, it's just an extra stipend that they'll provide. They will pay for additional, there's one that pays for additional employee recognitions, awards and incentives. So I don't know if that's that they win an award or if they are, submitting things to earn awards for the district or for themselves.
Oh, that's interesting.
There are other kinds of stipends like that for community relations. There's technology stipends that can happen. I mean, a lot of districts now just say, well, we provide you a cell phone because we provide all administrative cell phones, but some will stipulate, exactly what they will provide in that area, laptops, internet access. They'll pay for their internet access no matter where they are, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So those are the options, again, not typical, but that I've seen in contracts.
Okay. And then when do we find out what Dr. Hagat wants? Like, so
Yeah.
we present it and then we find out? Or-
So why don't you can have a conversation in exec session about that, at least where I think what I've learned about her current situation and what I think would what she's looking for in a contract.
So you've already learned some things.
I have, yes, I've been in
Perfect.
communication with not only with her, but also with her attorney,
Okay. That's
who's
what I
representing
was
her.
Wondering. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Thomas, can I
Yes.
ask you to go over the term part a little more, just to add some clarification? Because I do love the idea of the 3-year stability example, vision, but I also want to be mindful of the process for being flexible. That way we do move with the times, which is what we would expect for the rest of our staff. So if you could kind of just touch on that a little more so we make a good decision
Sure.
there, that would be helpful to me.
Sure. Like I said, the law provides for the authority to enter in a 3-year contract. So that essentially means it's caps it at 3. But you can enter into a contract anything up to that. And some of the superintendents have, come to the conclusion that they'd rather have a 2-year contract. It allows, and sometimes the boards like that as well, because it allows them to keep their superintendent up to market and allows renegotiation on a more frequent basis. And again, it would depend on your perspective, whether or not you think that's, the direction you want to go into. And by the way, that's something I do not know for Dr. Hagigat, whether or not she would be not only either accept a 2-year contract or want a 2-year contract. That was not covered. But like I said, I just did a 2-year contract and that was the preference of that candidate.
I'm not too sure if I could speak on this, but over the last 3 years I've been here, we did move from that 2-year process where we were headed towards the 3-year process. So do you maybe know what historically the district here has done?
I only know the last 2 contracts.
Okay.
Yeah,
Were those 3-year or the 2-year
3.
ones?
they
Okay.
were both 3.
And I do remember we went from a shorter span to a bigger one. So I couldn't remember at what point we did that.
Yeah.
So just to give a little clarification on what past boards have done. May I ask next, to understand a little more about the retirement part of this, along with the annuity, are those both concerning a pension?
Yeah,
Or is that
so-
something different?
In this case, where you're dealing with somebody who's coming from in-state, the retirement part is pretty simple. They're going to be a member of the ASRS. She already is. So that's really not an issue. It really comes in when you're dealing with somebody from out of state who's been maybe in another school system where they're part of another state's retirement system and they want to they're not familiar with our system and they may want to buy into our system. And sometimes, they may want to move money to that, and they may want to buy years of service, and that gets really complicated. We don't have that situation here, so it's fine. But the way the retirement system works is that, actuarially, the ASRS decides in order to pay out benefits, the contribution rate for this year based on how the stock market's doing is 12.1%. And then the employer pays 12.1% and the employee pays 12.1%. And that just fluctuates year to year. But the ASRS comes with other benefits, including provided long-term disability. What they don't cover is short-term disability. And that is something that superintendents will ask for in contracts that either is different or maybe the same as other 12-month administrators, is a provision of short-term disability insurance.
Next.
And, one also thing I think you might want to, and this is something to consider, some districts, because again, it can be lost that there's all these like 8 different ways of compensating a superintendent, is you might want to, in your own head or cheat sheet, or I can do it for you, total it up and say, okay, what is this worth? What is this worth? And here's what bottom line, what the total compensation looks like. How does this compare to what we're doing right now? That's an option as well.
That would be actually really helpful. I know we had talked about a compensation statement, so I'm not familiar with the term and exactly, is that somewhat similar?
That's basically it. It's distilling everything down to a number. The only thing is about that is that, it may give you a truer picture, but you got to remember, compare apples to apples, because you may not get that. If you're going to compare it to another district, for instance, you may not have that same thing with them, so that you don't want to compare your full compensation with somebody else's base. Obviously that wouldn't be a fair comparison.
Right. Two things. So if I heard, I'm just going to not repeat back, but try and articulate what I heard, which is whatever we're thinking of as far as a base salary, that we kind of tally up the things that we would like to either consider or offer to come up to that base salary amount, or is it starting at a base salary and then
Yeah.
everything is extra?
No, it's a great question. No, so these are distinct. Base salary is distinct from the other things. Again, if you wanted to get have a compensation statement, it would basically be the base plus annuity plus, car allowance plus, those kind of things. Again, if you wanted to get a full picture of what the compensation is really is at. Now, there are some districts that are, and again, I was a board member myself and I had to negotiate this as a board member. The superintendent candidate that we were entered in negotiations with really did not want very much money in the base. They were really sensitive to that. But they wanted money other places. And so,
Okay.
That's up to the district and the superintendent to arrive at an agreement about that.
Okay. That's super helpful. Now, I did make a note that since we can tie certain things into that dollar amount for the base salary, like I was just referencing, the performance pay is something separate. So what does that part look like? Is it part of the one contract, or is that, from what I have experienced, we do an addendum of some sort
Yeah.
afterwards? What does that look like from like a starting point for a district?
Right. So most districts, it is an extra amount above and beyond the base. The statute makes it clear that it doesn't have to be. But in operational terms, that's how most districts do it. It's an extra amount. It's an extra stipend, which is why, many districts, it's not the high dollar figure it used to be. But it is a way to have a public process of earning that salary. And again, channeling what the board wants out of the superintendent into an incentive. And so, again, I think it's best to be done after you bring the superintendent under contract. You make reference to it in the contract, and then that addendum comes later. Once you've agreed upon, these are the like 4 objective areas, and this is how it's going to be measured, and this is how it will be approved. And you've come to an agreement with your superintendent about that, then it's already referred into in the contract.
Got it. And then,
yeah.
okay, then it becomes like a thing itself. So I made a note for tying some of the, let me just skip over that. So as far as goals are concerned, my experience has been that the goals that go into the performance-based pay are the district goals, but in the way I'm processing this now, it sounds almost like they should be separate.
Well, they don't have to be. What I think that's a good starting point
Okay.
in the conversation. Say if you had 4 goals of the district, I think then you'd have to start thinking, okay, in the next year, how do we want to move towards these things? And what would success in these areas look like? And if we can get our arms around that, how could we quantify that in data? And if we could, let's put that into the contract. So it's built around these broad goals, but then this can be accomplished in a year, and here's where we want to go. And if that happens, then this happens.
Got it. Okay, that compartmentalizes it for me. Thank you very much. Last question, I promise, guys, I will move the floor to you guys. As far as health insurance and all those things, were you able to talk to our candidate, our finalist about those things? And do we talk about that in executive session?
I was able to talk to, so she's a member of the Arizona School Administrators, and they have provided her counsel to help negotiate her
Perfect,
contract.
okay.
I spoke with that person, so I know kind of
So
what
we'll
she's looking
have that
for.
at some point
Mhm.
okay, great. Thank you so very much. Because that is a really important part, is making sure
Absolutely.
your families are taken care of. So just glad we have that. Okay, guys, I'm done with my first questions.
I did have, I'm not sure if this was already addressed, not that we would aim for something like this, but if there was an issue that came up and we wanted to look at the contract prior to the 15 months, what does that look like?
Well, you can look at it, but you can't really renegotiate it. What you'd want to do is tee it up, and once that 15-month period window came in, then you could enter into a renegotiation.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Great question. Thank you, Dr. Diaz. Yeah, not that we're anticipating any of those things, but it is good to know, because going through the process without knowing,
Right.
it's not confusing to say, but it does. I don't know, it kind of, if we don't know or have no predictability about, it's harder to speak up about something you don't know about. I just had a question and it's escaping me. Sorry, guys. Do we want to maybe take some time to think about this before we go into executive session, take a break? Just hearing no questions or anything, I am not too sure what we can bring into our session, document wise for questions and stuff like that. So I was thinking maybe we take 10, 15 minutes before we go into executive session, just to pull.
Sure.
I just need to gather my thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's up to you.
We're good. Okay, maybe 10. And it's 10:01.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't have any more questions at this point, but I do want to grab what I printed off the printer and just kind of sit with my thoughts before we adjourn to executive session.
Maybe could we get that material? Because I don't see it electronically.
That's a great question, because I was writing notes. Is it possible to print the PowerPoint for us, Miss Miriam?
PowerPoint? Sure.
Awesome,
And then-
thank you.
Do we motion to adjourn at a certain time, or do we take our break and then come back and motion to adjourn? Okay,
That's what I was thinking. Take our break and then
okay.
come back. Thank you, Ms. Bueno. I wasn't sure if we had access to it.
Um,
Uh, do like, I'm trying to wrap my head around like what we do for teachers and principals in their like evaluation, and then how evaluation in a contract tied to contract renewal? Is there language that goes in there that would do that? Is that something other districts do? Are our teachers' contracts tied to their evaluations? I don't even, I'm like trying.
Yeah,
Sorry.
great question. There's only a reference to it in the contract about evaluation, but the actual, evaluation of the superintendent is done through your governing board policy. And you spell that out about the frequency of it, the timing of it, and what you're going to evaluate. Now, evaluation can be or separate, in terms of the overall performance, whereas performance pay may be another kind of sort of assessment on particularly targeted items. So there are separate, but in terms of your evaluation, what instrument you use, that's either in your policy or is an exhibit of your policy. The model policy that ASBA provides is fairly generic, and many have adopted a more robust one around their own particular goals. And so you may already have something in place that you just need to tweak. I'd have to pull up what your evaluation is, but in terms of the contract, it's just a reference point that the superintendent will be evaluated according to district policy. And then as to what that policy is, that's up to you to decide separately.
So we did recently talk about evaluation using ASBA's, it was right, ASBA's evaluation tool, but so would our policy, oh, it does say in accordance with district policy. So would our policy then say like, if the evaluation, if your performance evaluation doesn't meet, falls far below or whatever
Yeah.
things are, then your contract is subject to termination? Or would that be something that goes in here?
No, that's not the case. In statute for teachers, there are certain requirements depending on whether you're a continuing teacher or a non-continuing teacher. What happens if your performance is not any your chance to correct it and all that other stuff. There is no statutory requirement for that kind of system, and would not be typical to provide that in an evaluation. So, I mean, the individual has a 3-year contract. And if it's in, unless it's for cause, there is no way of using the evaluation, the inclusion of the evaluation in the contract to short, somebody's contract term. Again, unless it's for cause. So what has happened before in districts where there's just not a meeting of the minds, or, the board and the superintendent are not on the same page. And in the evaluation of the board, it's just not going well. There is usually a negotiated sort of departure because they do have a property interest in the contract and its value. So it's a little different than other employees, because they don't have those kind of contracts.
Why not though? I mean, just in consistency terms, right? If you're expecting one thing of your entire staff,
Right.
I guess I'm just a little.
Well, the short answer is that the legislature won't give us the authority to do that for any other employee. We have the authority to have 3-year contracts for superintendents. We don't have that authority for, and for principals. We don't have that authority for others.
So is there legislation that prohibits the use of an evaluation in a contract like termination clause, or is that just atypical?
I mean, there's no legislation that prohibits it, but I don't know of any superintendent that would sign a contract that said that if you have a poor evaluation, the contract's over. I mean, you can
Right.
always fire somebody for cause, and for cause could be abandonment of your job. It could
Right.
be, could be lots of things that are not just that you're not performing to the level that we hope to.
I see. I think where I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for you, but one of the things that I believe to be true, considering equity is a very fundamental component of our philosophy here, is whatever we're doing for our staff needs to be true of our superintendent. And personally, I feel like if a superintendent is not comfortable with a policy that, or with the evaluation piece that is similar to that of teachers, then they shouldn't be in our district. But that's just my opinion. And that was just a comment. I know you can't.
But our teacher contracts it says like, if you fall below, then there's certain measures, not necessarily that you're released from your contract. But what you're saying is the teacher contract is only 1 year versus 3
Right.
years.
And there are, depending on whether or not the teacher is a continuing teacher where they've been employed with the district for 3 or more years, they have a due process rights, and they have an opportunity to, a notice of inadequate classroom performance. They have a chance to a period where they can correct that. It's not a 1-year thing. It's a multi-year thing in actuality. And so, that's what I would say to that, which is in terms of evaluation. I mean, I think superintendent evaluations are getting more and more robust, particularly with performance pay. But the fact is that could be an argument for a 2-year contract. That would give you more options if you chose to, if you felt that a superintendent was not performing according to the evaluation, you could then, you have a shorter window and a shorter payout if you don't think things are going well. That is an option for you. Because again, the authority in statute is not requiring that you have a 3-year contract or even multi-year contract. It's requiring you, giving you the authority to have a contract of up to 3 years.
Okay. Does anybody remember, is our evaluation policy, did we update it to say that we would use the ASBA instrument, and is it in writing yet?
I don't believe so. I just think we had gone through the exercise, but I don't believe that we actually adopted that policy.
Okay.
But maybe we can request it at a later date to adopt that policy.
Yeah, I think my question, like even well before, was that if you were signing a contract, would you want to know what the instrument you were being evaluated on was? Now, granted, this contract doesn't tie your evaluation to anything, so there's that, but
Exactly.
Hearing no further questions, do we have a motion to adjourn to our executive session?
Jessica Bueno, so moved.
Reggie Carrillo, a second.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miriam. May we please have a roll call vote?
Carmen
adjourn.
Trujillo, Jessica Bueno,
Yes.
Reggie Carrillo,
Yes.
Alicia Vink,
Yes.
and Laura Diaz.
Hi.
Thank you. With that, our motion passes and the board will adjourn to executive session at 10:27 to discuss the salary provisions of the contract to offer Dr. Hagigat to be our superintendent. We hope he won't be longer than a few, hour or two at most. But we will come back and see you all afterwards. Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everybody. The time is 12:45 PM and we would like to resume to regular session. So immediately moving on, we'll go into item C1. The board may discuss and take action to approve the instructions given in executive session to its attorney. All right.
I would like to motion that we ratify the contract as discussed with council and direct board president to approve a draft.
Reggie Carrillo, a second.
Any discussion or recommendation? Miss Miriam, whenever you're ready, if we could have a roll call vote to vote on that would be great.
Just got kicked out of the system, so.
Okay.
Second. Sorry. I'll do the roll call. Carmen Trujillo,
Aye.
Jessica Bueno,
Yes.
Reggie Carrillo,
Yes.
Alicia Vink,
Yes.
and Laura Diaz.
Yes.
With that, our motion passes and we will move forward with the draft of the contract that will be written up. And we'll move forward with that. Thank you, everybody, for all of the time and attention that went into it. Any last comments, Mr. Thomas?
I think did you make the approval for you to review the draft that I would be offered? Is that-
Yes.
Okay, good. I didn't hear that part. Sorry.
Ms. Miriam, you caught that part as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Wow, that's really it. Okay, guys, that moves us on to item D1, our adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn our special meeting today?
Jessica Bueno, so moved.
Reggie Carrillo, a second.
Thank you very much. May we please have a roll call vote?
Sure. Carmen Trujillo,
Aye.
Jessica Bueno,
Yes.
Reggie Carrillo,
Aye.
Alicia Vink,
Aye.
and Laura Diaz.
Aye.
Thank you. With that, our motion passes and we will adjourn at 12:49 PM. And our next meeting is scheduled for this Thursday, May 12th at 6:15, right back here at the boardroom. Thank you to everybody that's participated in viewing our meeting today. And thank you, Mr. Thomas, for your presentation and direction and assistance. And thanks.